any talking head can make a YouTube video and say, oh, I think these 12 champions are pretty good. I would rank this one in S tier and this one in C tier because that's the way I feel. But it takes a truly creative talking head to come up with an idea like I have done today. So I ran a series of polls on my YouTube channel, which I'll throw up on the screen here now for you to check out. Throughout those polls, I actually did surveys of anybody who wanted to participate on YouTube, of course, and I made a tier list based on the answers to that particular sequence of polls. So we have every single epic champion from the Skinwalker faction on the tier maker here. This is going to be going back to my epics only tier list that I was partaking in last year. I'm going to be finally continuing the series. If you guys like the community voting, let me know. These votes were all determined at, whenever I selected them. So the percentages might change, especially if some of you guys go and vote on the polls now. So just keep that in mind. And then so on the poll, I did an S, an A, a B, and then a C/F tier, just because YouTube only let me have 4 options. But obviously we have 5 tiers here. So the way that's going to work essentially is if you guys voted for C/F, I'll basically just go ahead and choose and put them into one of those tiers. So first up, we have Taurus. Taurus, what does Taurus do? If we come and take a look here, he has an A1, which attacks one enemy, heals by 20% of the damage inflicted if they have a poison. A2 attacks one enemy, 100% chance of placing a weaken on a 3-turn cooldown. And then his big money skill, which is this champion receives damage equal to 99% of their current HP, places an unkillable buff on this champion for 2 turns, has a 100% chance of placing 4 5% poison debuffs on all enemies for 2 turns, with an accuracy aura in faction crypts. If you run 2 of this guy along with somebody like a Kymar and an Eleanoril or somebody else like that who can explode poisons, this is basically the old-timey poison strat speedrun for places like Dragon and whatnot, because with 2 of these bad boys you're putting out 8 poisons, which when they're detonated will be enough to actually kill basically the entire team. So with that in mind, where did the community decide to rank him? They went ahead actually and put him into the B tier. So I think that's fair. I'll go ahead and let you guys know if I agree or disagree with any of these champions as we continue. But I think B tier is definitely fair for Taurus. He has been power crept quite a bit. There's champions out there that just do what he does, but better with a bit more survivability and not damaging themselves, right? So somebody like a Tomb Lord, for example, places the 4 poisons as well, although it is conditionally on a critical hit. So some affinity issues there, right? But he just does it better, I would say. So B is certainly fair. Next up, we have Flesh Terror. A1, 50% chance transferring a random debuff from this champion to the target. A2 basically increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn. So we're seeing this guy get used in some cheese comps inside the Hydra with Yaga, for example. Attacks all enemies, decreases the duration of all enemy buffs by 1 turn. Increases the duration of all enemy debuffs by 1 turn. So he's got a bit of kind of like a very budget Godseeker Aniri going on. What did you guys decide? Well, you guys decided that we're going to put him into the C or the F tier. So considering what he brings to the table, I think it's only fair to rank him probably in the F tier in all honesty. I don't think he's that good of a champion, right? Like, he's not doing a ton of damage or anything like that. You could make the argument that you could run him in like Cruelty or something like that since he's bringing 2 AoEs, but they are very long cooldown, right? So they're 4-turn cooldowns each. Base stats are very shoddy at best, right? Like 89 base speed. Pretty trash for a support epic, honestly, in my opinion. Scabrius is one of the few epics that I don't actually have, and I think he was a fusion or something like that at some point, or part of a fusion maybe. A1 has a 50% chance, books to a 70 of placing a poison. Attacks all enemies, 100% chance of a leech on a 3-turn. Attacks one enemy, places a weaken, also places an increased attack on himself if the weaken is placed, and then damage increases by 20% when attacking enemies under poison. I think this guy could be very useful in the clan boss. Probably not too many areas apart from that though, although he does have very decent base stats. What did the community decide? The community decided that we are actually going to put him right in here with Taurus in the B tier. So I think that's fair. I don't really think he deserves to be above the B tier by any means, just because he's not that good of a champion in all honesty, right? Like, there's champions that do his role but better, so somebody that we'll get to later on the list, for example. There are better poisoners, and there's certainly better damage dealers, so he's kind of a jack of all trades, but an absolute master of none, which is a bit of a shame, to say the least. We have Ripper. Ripper attacks one enemy, destroys their max HP by 30% of the damage inflicted, attacks one enemy 2 times, damage increases as the target's HP decreases, and A3 attacks one enemy, will ignore 50% of their defense, destroy their max HP by 40% of the damage inflicted. Unfortunately, this doesn't work as well as you might think it would for somewhere like a Scarab King or something like that. He does have very decent reviews inside the arena though, so perhaps he has good multipliers or something like that. I haven't built him out, so I can't really talk too much about him. You guys went ahead though and decided that we were going to be putting him into the C/F tier. So with this particular guy, I do think he's going to go into the C tier. He's going to be doing a little bit more than Flesh Terror, in my opinion, so he has a little bit more usefulness in his kit. You could definitely, you know, get some usefulness out of that. Ignore defense, decreasing max HP, all that sort of good stuff, right? So overall, I don't think he's too bad in terms of an epic champion from the Skinwalker faction here. We have rainbeast, the absolute badass-looking reindeer here, of course. This guy used to be absolutely ridiculous. I remember, and this story is shared by a lot of people, but I remember one of my first weeks playing in Raid, I went against this guy solo in the arena. He was a level 50. I went ahead and fought against him with my entire team, so I had a Kale and like a Icecrusher or something like that, right, with all 4 champions there. Built out in my best gear, and he just would not die because of his passive. So when an ally attacked, because I don't think this, I think this used to be different. So he used to place a shield on himself, I'm pretty sure, because I distinctly remember the It Glows passive kept triggering when I would attack him. So when an ally's attack places a shield buff equal to 35% of this champion's max HP, 18k base HP for an epic, that's pretty good. And that's for 2 turns, occurs once per turn, will not place a shield buff on this champion. A2 attacks one enemy 2 times, reviving a random ally with full HP if this attack kills the enemy. Defense-based attack, and then attacks one enemy on the A1, placing a continuous heal buff on the ally with the lowest HP for 1 turn. I actually think this guy is pretty cool. I think you guys rated him a little bit more lower than he should be, in all honesty, because you guys went ahead and put him into C/F. There's only like 1 or 2 champions that will actually be overriding on this list, so considering that you guys chose C or F, I'm going to go ahead and put him into C tier. He's a pretty decent damage dealer. On his A2, he can actually smack a little bit. He has very good base defense. Obviously, the conditional revive is nice too. I did actually use this guy to try and get through the faction wars because, for example, if he's the one that kills the faction wars boss and you only had 1 champion die, he's going to revive that champion, obviously, which gives you the 3 stars. So that's something that's overlooked in a little bit of cases. He has a lot of support in his kit, right? With the continuous heals, the shields, the revive. This guy is pretty decent, in my opinion. It'd be nice to see him get a little bit of a buff, though, in all honesty. Like, he definitely has been power crept like so many others, so that would be interesting to see how Plarion would buff him these days, that's for sure. Next up, we have Snorting Thug. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of stealing 1 random buff. A2, attacks one enemy, will ignore the target's defense. If they have no active buff, steals 2 random buffs from the target. So this is pretty cool. Very good base HP on this guy. Completely ignoring the defense on a one-time hitter is a pretty strong skill, in all honesty. So if we think about somebody like a Queen Ava, is kind of a legendary version of this, although she's only ignoring 50% of defense, and it's not conditional like this is, right? So you have to make sure they have no active buffs, which for PvP these days is definitely a lot harder said than done, because you have things like obviously Stone Skin, you have Polymorph would also affect this skill since he's stealing buffs and all those sorts of good things. Passive, 50% chance of stealing 1 random buff from the attacker when hit, occurs once per turn. Counter attacks the attacker if they have no active buffs, so you're getting into that hard hitting A1 there, assumedly. And he is an HP damage dealer, like I said, so he's an interesting champion. I'll have to look into his multipliers and stuff like that at some point. I don't think I have him on my account, though. You guys went ahead and voted this guy once again into the C/F tier, so I am going to go ahead and place him into the C tier. I think he could be a very competent damage dealer, especially if his multipliers are good, because it does also have auras and all that sort of good stuff. As you can see, people aren't too shabby on him either, right? Like, so for example, Hydra, stealing all those buffs could definitely be useful. And overall, we don't have many epic HP-based nukers, so I certainly think it is a decent champion. Next up, we have Yaga the Insatiable, one of the more notorious champions that we'll see on the list here today. This is going to be an attack one enemy, 50% chance of placing a poison on the A1. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 75% chance of placing a poison. And A3 attacks one enemy, damage increases by 25% against targets under poison, accuracy, aura, and battles. The community went ahead and voted this guy into the C/F tier. I'm going to go ahead and make the executive decision that we are just throwing him straight into the F tier. This guy is going into the bin. Not much else needs to be said about that. If you're a newer player, however, the reason for that is just because his multipliers aren't very good. Your Kale, as a starter champion, is going to be a better poisoner than this guy, and the Kale doesn't need epic books, whereas this guy is essentially just a trap for your epic books. His only good rating, really, is going to be in the Demon Lord, and I would say he's probably not even that good there. Not sure why people are rating him so high inside the Sand Devil or Phantom Shogun, in all honesty. I imagine when you're farming those consistently and you just have that level of gear, you're probably going to have a good experience with them either way. But if you can place some poisons on them, you might be able to get some use out of it, in all honesty. Next up, we're going to have Ursine Icecrusher, who, along with his brother Ursine Ironhyde, were actually the champions that you could acquire from the Battle Pass back in the day, oddly enough. Attacks one enemy, has a 30% chance of placing a block active skills for 1 turn. Attacks all enemies, 100% chance of placing a decreased crit rate debuff for 2 turns. I think he was actually one of the first champions in the game that had the decreased crit rate, which is pretty cool. Decreases the damage all allies receive from critical hits by 15%. Fills this champion's turn meter by 5% whenever an enemy lands a normal, strong, or weak hit. That's actually a very strong passive if you think about it. That's basically like having Weaken up on your entire team. Sorry, Strengthen up, like the weak version of Strengthen on your entire team, which is pretty cool. And then you also put him in like Bulwark or something like that, and he can definitely absorb quite a bit of damage, I would say. And then the ally HP in all battles by 25%. Definitely a pretty interesting champion. Where is he going to be ranked? Well, we went ahead and we ranked him in the C/F tier. So I'm going to go ahead and put him in the C tier. I don't think he deserves to be an F, in all honesty. Next up, we do have his brother Ursine Ironhyde, which is a pretty cool looking champion as well. I definitely think this is the better champion between the two. So we have an A1, which attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of increasing the cooldown of one of the target's skills by 1 turn at random. Fun fact, this essentially does nothing, because when the enemy takes their turn, it's going to basically tick over as if they'd taken a turn, right? So you think about a champion like a warlord or something like that. Let's say they put the champion's skills on cooldown for 4 turns. As soon as that champion takes a turn, it's going to remove 1 from that tick, so it's essentially now a 3-turn cooldown on the rest of those, if that makes sense. So unless this guy's counterattacking a ton and basically just hitting it back to back to back to back, he's not really doing anything on the A1, which is unfortunate. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 100% chance of decreasing the turn meter by 5%. Decreases the turn meter by 10% instead if they're under a decrease attack. A3 attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance of placing the decrease attack on a 4-turn cooldown. Definitely power crept there a little bit. Each hit has a 100% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 7.5. Each hit also has a 50% chance of putting one of the target's skills on cooldown if the target is under a decreased crit rate. So you can definitely see the kind of synergy with his brother there, right? So if they're under decreased crit rate and this guy attacks them with the AoE, that is a 100% chance of putting one of the target's skills on cooldown. That is actually insane, because that's not, you know, a 4-turn cooldown or increasing it by 3 turns. If the enemy has a skill that takes like 7 turns, let's say in PvE, right? You're facing some legendaries, that's going on a full cooldown for 7 turns, which is absolutely insane. And skinwalkers can be quite challenging to get through in terms of the faction wars. So if you are just placing cooldowns on all those champions, right, that is absolutely incredible. So they are a tandem though, obviously, right? So we voted for into C or F tier, honestly, here, which was the decision made by the community. I'm going to go ahead and put them into the C tier as well. I think they're both very decent champions. I don't really think they're meta-defining or anything like that, but they are pretty cool. Hoforhes the Tust is a very, very cool champion. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a stun. Interestingly, it shows like a burn effect here or something like that, but he doesn't place burn. A2 increases attack and increases crit rate on all allies for 2 turns, and then his A3 revives 2 random allies with 50% HP and fills their turn meter by 50% on a 5-turn cooldown. After the revival, places a strengthen buff on all allies for 2 turns, and increases ally resistance in all battles by 40. So this guy definitely helped me out in the faction wars getting to Lydia. I pulled him quite late. I took him to 6 stars. He has very good base HP, decent base speed, okay base defense. He's nothing too crazy in terms of a support champion. It'd be nice if he brought a little bit of heals or something like that, even if it was on an A1, because essentially he's just there and reviving, right? But he's not really going to keep people topped up, so you kind of have to bring somebody else to do that if you want that role into your squad. The community was quite kind to this fellow, though, and they actually went ahead and ranked him into the B tier. So I'd probably put him ahead of Scabrius. Honestly, I think he'd be somewhere here, probably ahead of Taurus as well, because if you're just trying to progress in the game or whatnot, he's going to be a little bit more useful than Taurus in that role. Next up, we have kind of an OG champion who used to be used a ton inside the clan boss, actually, because of his A1, which is attacks one enemy, has a 35% chance of placing a 5% poison, so nothing too crazy there. removes all debuffs from a target ally, then heals them by 40% on that A2, and if you speed tune him right, obviously he can remove that stun from the clan boss. Then on a 4-turn cooldown, he places an increased defense on all allies for 2 turns, heals everybody with 20% of their max HP. Overall, base stats, this guy is pretty terrible, honestly. Very low HP, incredibly low, almost non-existent defense. Very good speed, though, which kind of works in his favor, of course. And he has an aura of defense in faction crypts by 27%. Now, the community was quite kind to this guy once again, and they actually went ahead and ranked him inside the B tier. So we have another B tier champion there helping to fill out the list on the top part of that, which is pretty cool. Next up, we have Fane. Fane is actually going to be one of the only champions that I override on the list. Fane has an attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of stealing 5% of the target's turn meter. A2 attacks one enemy, 100% chance placing 5% poisons and a decrease attack. A3 is a 3 times hitter placing a decreased defense, a weaken, and healing this champion for every debuff on the target. She has very good base stats, very decent base speed, very, very high base attack, and she absolutely hits. I have a full-on guide breaking down Fane on my account, because I do use her every single day inside the Demon Lord clan boss. She is absolutely fantastic. She is such a good epic damage dealer, and she can absolutely smack as well. Not to mention, she's also bringing turn meter control, so she's a multi-hitter champion with turn meter control, which makes her very good for Fire Knight progression as well. The community was pretty kind to her, and they ranked her inside the A tier. However, my executive decision on this is she's actually going to go ahead and make her way into the S tier. As far as damage dealers inside the epic category, because again, I did put the context on all of the polls, but some people might not have read it or whatnot. Essentially, this tier list is only taking into consideration if there was epic champions in the game, so there's no legendaries, no rares, and no uncommons or commons, of course, and certainly no mythicals. So this is an epics only tier list. And if only epics existed in the game, you would be seeing Fane everywhere, from boss killing to probably some PvP. She is very squishy, right? So you're not actually going to use her in PvP, but if you need some sort of a boss kill, she can be very good for that. And she absolutely smacks. It is hard to overestimate how hard she hit. Next up, we have Bovos. Once he decides to join us, there we go. An interesting looking champion, to say the least. I absolutely love the shield on this guy, how he's got like a rune on there. It looks so badass. This guy actually was one of a fusion. He was part of a fusion. So he attacks one enemy, 50% chance of a decreased speed, which is pretty cool on the A1. Attacks all enemies, 100% chance of decreased crit rate, and a decreased crit damage for 2 turns. So this is another champion that you could actually go ahead and pair with Ursine Ironhyde, right? If you don't have Ursine Icecrusher. Then A3 removes 1 random debuff from all allies, places increased crit rate and increased crit damage. So kind of decreasing the enemy's crit rate, increasing your crit rate, all that sort of good stuff. Heals an ally by 10% of their max HP when they're hit with a critical hit. Little spoiler alert, when you're hit with a critical hit, you're probably losing a whole lot more than 10% of your max HP. So it'd be cool if it was like placing a shield or something like that, or something crazy like that, or even if this had like, say, a 3-turn cooldown or something like that, but it was they get a block damage or an unkillable or something really cool like that, right? Like, he has so much potential. If you're not running him, let's go ahead and bring over the tier list. So if you're not running him with the Ironhyde, I would say he falls into F tier. He doesn't really do a whole lot for your champions, or for your team rather. If you're running him with, so he's very conditional. If you're running him with Ironhyde and you don't have Icecrusher, he's going to be C tier. And the community voted C or F. If you don't have Ironhyde, or if you're not running him with Ironhyde, I'm going to say he's going to be F tier, because he doesn't really bring any sort of healing or anything like that. He doesn't bring any sort of sustain. He doesn't even bring like a decreased attack or decreased defense for you. It's basically just decreasing the crit rate. However, in PvE, they're only going to have a 15% crit rate anyway, so all the damage you're taking is just coming from their obscenely high levels of attack. So getting that decreased, I would say, is a little bit more important than decreasing their crit rate, of course. Next up, we have Basher. Basher has an A1 where he has a 75% chance of placing a weaken. An A2 attacking all enemies, increases the cooldown by all of the target skills by 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown on a void champion. Attacks 4 times at random. Has a 100% chance placing a block buffs debuff for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown. Absolutely fantastic champion. Increases ally HP in all battles by 25%. What did the community decide? The community actually made a questionable decision, and they ranked him inside the A tier, and this is probably going to be the only other champion on the list that I override. My executive decision is to move him into the S tier. There are only a handful, probably count them on like 3 fingers, of champions in the epic tier that can increase enemy cooldowns, which is so good for PvP. I use this guy for so long in my arena teams, and he's only now been replaced by a mythical champion with Night Queen Crixia. So the fact that I was using an epic who then got replaced by a mythical says a lot about the quality of this champion. Very useful even still in somewhere like Tag Team Arena or something like that. Absolutely fantastic champion. You compare him to like a Lika or something like that who can also increase the cooldowns, and the issue with her is that she can weak hit, whereas he is a Void Affinity champion, so there are no weak hits, so he definitely deserves to be in that S tier spot. Next up, we have the weird Hairless Cat here. We have a Kemptum. A1 attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a poison. If the target is under Hex, each hit also has a 50% chance applying a debuff spread effect, taking one random debuff from the target and placing it on all enemies. A3 attacks all enemies 3 times. Each hit, 75% chance of increasing the duration of any Hex. If they're not under Hex, each hit also has a 75% chance of placing a Hex. Now, that seems like a pretty decent champion so far. What makes this guy insanely good is his passive 100% chance of inflicting damage from one poison debuff to enemies under a Hex debuff whenever their allies receive damage from poison debuffs. If you don't know what this means, essentially you are detonating a poison stack on every single enemy whenever somebody takes a tick of a poison. This also counts as a hit, so you can apply set effects from it. So for example, a toxic set can apply more poisons, a stun set can apply stuns, and all that sort of good stuff. This guy is absolutely insane. I have a video on my channel that you can check out, which is basically me speed farming Spider Hard 10 with this guy in less than a minute. He's not the only one on the team, of course, but he is absolutely crucial to that particular team, and he increases ally speed in all battles by 18%. What did the community decide? Well, I agreed with them. They actually went ahead and ranked him inside the S tier, so he is the 3rd Skinwalker epic to join the S tier. According to the community, he is the only Skinwalker epic, and it would be more so like this if you guys had your way, but I will, you know, I'll call it out. You guys voted for that, but I am overriding it. I'm putting them here. I make the rules. Thank you guys all so much for voting, by the way. Make sure to, you know, turn on that bell notification, all the good YouTube stuff if you want to get involved with the votes in the future. I also did call it out in my Discord, so if you want to take part of this in the future as well, definitely make sure to join the Discord and keep your eyes on the raid channel. We're almost there. We're almost at the end. Next up, we have Gren. A1 attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of stealing a random buff. Attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit ignores shields. Places a true fear debuff on all enemies for 1 turn if this attack kills an enemy. Also places an unkillable buff on this champion for 1 turn if it kills an enemy. Pretty decent A2 there in all honesty. A3 swaps HP with an enemy, then grants an extra turn. So if this guy came in and had like unkillable or block damage or something like that, right? He can swap HP. So let's say he's low, right? Let's say unkillable. He can essentially just swap HP with an enemy as long as he has the accuracy. They're now low. He gets an extra turn to come into either his A1 or his A2. He deals 30% more damage against targets whose HP is lower than this champion's HP. And this is, of course, an attack-based damage dealer, which is a little bit weird because for their HP to be lower, he would want to be like an HP-based damage dealer because he has very low base HP as well, right? I think he's very situational. It'd be cool if he had a passive that placed like an unkillable on himself when he falls below a certain amount of HP or whatnot, but essentially what you have to do is come in with the A2 and then basically just wait until he gets hit a bunch and then use his A3. Very, very weird champion in all honesty. Takes a lot to set up, I would say. The community decided, though, that he was actually going into a B tier, interestingly enough, so maybe there's something I'm missing with this champion. Let me know. If you're watching this far, let me know what I'm missing with Gren, why the community rated him so high. He was very solidly in the B tier as well. It was like almost 50% of votes or something like that cast him into the B tier, so I was a little surprised by that, to say the least. We have, finally, Frenzy, the very cool-looking hyena champion. A1 attacks one enemy, 50% chance of instantly activating HP burn. Defense-based damage dealer, by the way. Attacking 3 times at random, each hit 100% chance of placing an HP burn debuff for 2 turns. Builds this champion's turn meter by 10% for HP burn placed by this skill. Attacks all enemies, 100% chance of placing a provoke. Also places an increased defense buff on this champion for 2 turns. That is pretty good control. Increases this champion's defense by 2% each time an HP burn is activated. on enemies, stacks up to 20%, resets each round. I have a feeling this champion, she has defense in dungeons by 30%, by the way. I have a feeling this champion would be way stronger if it just didn't say this right here, right? So if it didn't reset each round, because apart from that, her kit is very, very solid. I do think she's a very good champion though, right? Like bringing in that provoke on a 4-turn cooldown. She's obviously a void, so it's not going to weak hit. Placing HP burns, filling her own turn meter, and then also detonating those burns is very incredible. And then for somewhere like, say for example, Hydra or Demon Lord, or, you know, some of the City of Centrano stages, those sorts of things, right? This reset for each round isn't really going to play into it, so I do think she could be a very competent damage dealer for somewhere like that. Now, if we're looking at where the community ranked her, they actually went ahead and threw her into the B tier. So, as you can see, we kind of got this overall, like, pyramid shape, nothing making it into the A tier. Again, according to my tier list, it would actually be like this if it was fully left unfiltered, so to speak. But this is how it looks essentially. I think this is a very fair ranking. I don't think any of these champions really deserve to be A tier. So obviously the ones in the S tier I do think deserve to be there, and then obviously the ones in the B tier I think deserve to be there as well. Let me know what you think of Frenzy though as well. She's a very interesting champion. I haven't had a chance to use her, of course, because I don't have her. She's one of the only 2 epics that I don't actually have, which is a little bit of a shame. I'm very interested to get Marius as well. He's going to be a pretty cool skinwalker to try out and just see, you know, how he does in Faction Wars and Spider and all that sort of good stuff. Thank you guys all so much for watching, though. I'll probably be doing this at some point in the future, especially if the reception to the video is pretty good, so stay tuned for those polls that are coming up. Next up, of course, we would have the Orcs, and there's a lot of epics in here, so that'd be a lot of polls to have you guys vote on. But thank you for the support on the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.